What's up, everybody? It's Brandon Lokaren here, and today we are going to be talking about what renovations you should be doing to your flips. This video is intended for people that are looking to flip properties and are looking for the best tips in the industry so that they can kind of put this together and use it to their advantage so that they don't have issues with their flips. So, jumping into it, the first thing you're going to want to do is thorough planning. It's really important to plan your project well. And when I say that, I mean that before you even close on the property, you should sort of have a plan. And that includes like what renovations you want to do, what finishes you want to do, what contractors you want to get in there, and how much work, if any permits are even required as well, right? So depending on the amount of work that you need to do on the property, that's going to determine if you need to pull permits. So could you even expedite the permitting process, right? If there's a ton of renovations, maybe you're doing a pop the top or something like that, you're going to want to make sure that you hire an architect because architects could add project delays. So it's really important that you plan this project well in the beginning and get as much, if not all, the planning done before you even close on the property, right? So basically, like, what you're going to want to do is outline a plan. You're going to want to outline a plan with like who's involved in the project, the architect, the contractor. If there's any specific contractors that you also want to use, you want to list those out and then put together a schedule. So I like to use Gantt chart. It's called GANTT, I think. Gantt chart, yeah. Gantt chart, and basically that's going to give you a schedule that you could put together and put each subcontractor in that schedule and present it to them at the time of starting the project. And again, like depending on if the project is small or if it's big, that's going to determine if you even want to do this, right? Because you don't want to overplan, you don't want to do too much work, right? But you're going to want to have at least like a meeting on site with the people that are going to be involved in the project, and you say, okay, who's going to go first? The demo guys are going to go first, and we're going to get the structural guys in there. Then we're going to get the plumber and the electrician in. Well, the plumber and the electrician could work together, so like let's get them in together. So you're going to want to make sure that everyone understands where their role is and when they need to jump into the property and the project. So make sure you do thorough planning. That's super important for the execution part because you don't want to jump into it and say, oh crap, I forgot the drywall guy, or oh snap, like we were supposed to actually rough in the shower before the tile guys. Like what? Like, so you want to make sure that you have those questions answered up front, especially if it's your first and you don't have a lot of experience with construction. You're going to want to make sure that you account for all this stuff. Next thing is budgeting. And again, you should know your budget before you even purchase the property, okay? You should have a rough idea and a better, really, like you should have like a rough idea and also a little bit of contingency in place for if the budget does creep up. So typically what we do is we add 10% of whatever construction cost is, whatever rough construction cost is, we'll add 10% on top of that and then use that number as our construction cost before we even submit on the project. So you always also want to overestimate things, especially before you're writing the offer. When you're writing the offer, overestimate things, right? If you know that you spend, $5-6 a square foot on floors, I probably estimate, $7. Are the subfloors soft? Are you going to have to replace subfloors? And, it could jump to 10 almost, right? $10 a square foot. So these are all important things to really factor in as you're going through the project. And it sounds like it's an overkill, but you don't want to have an issue where you did not account for something and you missed it and you underbid and now you're underwater on this project and you can't get rid of it. I see so many homes going on the market that are unfinished. I'm going to say on the market, I mean off market, that are unfinished where contractors decided that they were going to pull out or maybe the developer ran out of money. So it's really important to make sure that you overestimate. I would rather you guys not get a contract because you overestimate your construction than get one and not have enough money to complete it. So make sure you figure out what your budget is. That's super important before you even buy the property, right? So next thing is you're going to want to maximize your space, right? So look at the comps in the area and see like, hey, should we open up these walls? Should we, put in some storage under the stairs? Do we need to pop the top? Did you buy a Rambler that you were hoping to pop the top on so that you can almost double the square footage on the property? So you're going to want to make sure that you maximize the space. Plan for that, right? plan for those things, because most people, especially in America, they tend to hold on to things a lot longer than they should, right? So you want to make sure that you are planning for that, and storage goes a long way, especially when you're looking at future buyers. Next thing is material selection. So if you have an architect on this project, you are going to go through material selections with them. Typically, it's done by the architect or a designer. Maybe you can hire a designer instead of the architect, but they're going to have really like material choices, right? And you need to give them a budget. That's the thing. So that's a reason of making sure that you maintain your budget at the beginning of the project, and now you just is parting like where you're executing it, right? So you're going to say, hey, look, Mr. or Mrs. Architect, you have $6,000 in allowance for this kitchen, right? So that means the cabinets, the countertops, the faucets, and disposal, tile, everything needs to be under $6,000, right? And obviously 6,000 is a lot less for cabinets, but so you want to make sure that you are really like figuring these things out, and you're giving the architect or the designer or yourself, maybe you're just doing this by yourself, or you have a friend helping you out. Make sure you give them a budget, and you give them an allowance and say, hey, you cannot go over this amount. If you can come in under budget, that would be great. The other thing is, kind of trying to figure out, like, there's so many like knockoffs out there. Like when I say like knockoffs, like we see it a lot in the furniture world where it's like, this bed is from Restoration Hardware, but you can get it from, I don't know, XYZ retailer, and it's a third of the cost, right? So look for those things, right? Look for products that are still good quality, and look at the reviews on them that may not necessarily be a Brizo faucet, right? Maybe use a Delta, right? Because actually, like, Delta owns Brizo, so it's the same internals. So you could look at things like that and do research. One of the things that we did was we used cabin grade hardwood floors. So it gave us the ability to do hardwood floors on the property, and it just wasn't like a high-end brand, but it was still, at the end of the day, hardwood floors. And people love hardwood floors. They don't care what the brand is at the end of the day. They just care more so that the fact that the property has hardwood floors and you thought about it. So the other thing, too, is you're going to want to figure out how you're going to divide up the work, right? So are you doing DIY? Are you doing it yourself? Are you hiring professionals? Are you doing a combination of both? And this goes back to your schedule and your planning, right? You're going to want to make sure that, hey, okay, I'm responsible for the finishes. I'm going to install all the finishes. And the plumber is going to come in and rough everything in. You're going to want to make sure that they understand their scope of work before they start the project. And you're going to need to figure out when you need to get in there, when you need to do certain things so that you don't hold up your own project. Because typically a flip should take about, 30 to 60 days to complete, and you should be out. Sometimes things could take longer depending on, if you need permitting, architects, waiting on plans and whatnot. But typically, if you don't need any plans or you don't need any serious permits, then generally you can be in and out within like 60 to 90 days by the time you sell it on the exit, right? So make sure that you figure out who's going to be doing what, and you plan accordingly. Like, so one of the things that we do with our plumbers is like we say, hey, look, you can rough in everything, but we're going to install all the fixtures. And that saves a little bit of money because they don't have to come back a second time. Same thing with the electrician. Hey, you can rough in everything, but we're going to install all the light fixtures because, again, they don't have to come back for everything. So you want to make sure that you figure out ways to save money, especially on your project. Now, the other thing is when you pick design trends, this is a huge one, right? Pick something that's neutral and that the majority of the market is going to like. It's really important to understand what the market likes, and don't pick something that is too trendy, especially that you might be the only one liking it, right? So like for instance, like don't go with like, I don't know, like green floors just because it's trendy in that fancy Architectural Digest magazines or something or whatever. Like, don't go with that because you saw it there. It may not even work for your project or the location that you're putting it in. So consider, when you're looking at design trends, like consider what areas that you're doing your project in, and actually like how how that's going to affect the market. How is the market going to receive your ideas or any design trend ideas? For instance, like if you're in Manhattan, you're going to want to stay up to date. You're going to, like right now what's in is like black and white and natural tones, right? So you're going to want to kind of stay on trend. But black and white might not match something in, I don't know, like somewhere in Alabama or Kentucky or something, right? They might still prefer like red cherry cabinets, which is fine. And again, like this is something to do research on, to understand your market and understand like who is buying in these properties, who's buying in this market. So make sure you understand design trends, especially for the market specifically that you're in, instead of what's popular on Pinterest or in Architectural Digest magazine. So the next thing is time management. So in order to keep staying on schedule with your project, you have to continue to stay on top of subcontractors. So I recommend having, multiple meetings with contractors on site and, review what their scope of work is and say, hey, okay, when are you going to be done with this bathroom? Or when are you going to be done painting this room or this portion of the house, right? So that people understand like who's behind them, who's ahead of them, right? So they can understand, okay, well, I got to rough in this plumbing before the drywall guy starts. Or I have to rough in this electrical box before the painter goes on, right? So you're going to want to make sure that people understand these things and are also up to date with like who and when they're coming in. So make sure you manage your project well and don't just like set it and forget it. Like a lot of people, like I see, they just start the project and then don't check on it. You should be going to your flips at least 2 or 3 times a week to check on things, right? And if you are far away and you're trying to manage it, then I recommend having somebody that is boots on the ground that is willing to check on it for you. And it could be somebody like your realtor who you're going to use to sell this property. So make sure you check with them and check in with them to make sure and ask them to check on these things, right? And you may have to pay them for it, but trust me, it is money well worth spending that you're going to save a ton of money on, one, and then two, it's going to actually save you time, which is more important than money. So time management, that's super important. So some of the thing that, going back to the design trends, right, you want to make sure that you're continuing functionality over fashion, right? So for instance, like if you're in an area where people prefer or need a lot more storage, they're not going to want to see like open shelvings in the kitchen when you could have add upper cabinets, right? Because that's super trendy and it just doesn't make sense. The other thing is, like, do the stairs have railings on it? Are they like see-through stairs, like where it's like mid-century modern? You're going to want to think about these things because those are really important over the course of like what people are actually living in the house are going to want, right? So do they care about the fancy tub or do they prefer a stand-up shower? Those are all things that you want to think about as you're designing this project and as you're performing on the job. The next thing is future-proofing, right? So when you future-proof a property, it means that you're not, again, like staying on current trends or future trends, or you're not doing something that you completely like because your trend might not be, like aligning with the current trend or people's like likability, right? So you want to try to appeal to as much people as you can on that property. So don't go too specific on products. Make sure you pick general products that everyone is going to like. So for instance, like if white cabinets are in right now and they're still kind of in, people like white cabinets. They're also timeless. So people are thinking about whether or not these pieces are timeless or not. So don't go picking something that is super specific. Like don't go picking like, I don't know, like a black light fixture because it looked cool and it might be cool. But you want to make sure that you pick something that's neutral and that's going to appeal to somebody and everybody, the majority of the people, rather than like specific persons, right? So make sure you check into that. As you're planning, going back to planning a little bit, you also want to make sure that you check your local county permits, right? Check with your local county codes and see if any permits are required, right? You might, obviously if you're popping the top, you're going to have a permit. If you're just renovating a bathroom, floors, and painting a property, you likely may not need to have a permit. So make sure you check into those ordinances and check into those county zoning and codes and stuff like that before you perform any work on the property. And in fact, during your planning stages, you're going to want to make sure you do that. It's also important to make sure you continue to keep open communication with contractors and your entire team on the project. Provide, photo updates. Ask your realtor if you're away. Like, hey, look, can you go by and take some pictures of this? Ask your subcontractors for pictures as well. Progress photos, that goes a long way. Because then as you're doing bigger projects, it could even provide an opportunity for you to go to other people and say, hey, look, like I'm doing this project. It's a little bit bigger. This is my history, though. Can you lend me some money kind of thing, right? So the other thing, too, is documentation. The biggest thing that people do not do they like to reinvent the wheel, right? So the biggest thing that they don't do is they don't like record what they did on a project, right? So keep a list of all the contractors that you use, keep a list of all the materials that you use, and like try to track everything. Like, did everything go to time that you allotted, or did it take longer? Did it take shorter, right? So then that way you can kind of get a better idea for your next project as you're planning, because then it's going to become easier and easier. And the idea is that you want to make things repetitive, right? So, have a certain trend that you're going for, that, you use XYZ faucet on every single project, or you use this type of floors on every single project, right? Especially if you're flipping in a certain area, generally that design trend will stick with those things, right? So then you have people actually looking out for your property and looking out for your project to see what you're doing next, right? So make sure that you are staying, on top of things, and you're recording everything. It's super important, so that way you can have a seamless project the second time. The first time, you might have some issues, okay? So, and that's okay. It's a learning curve, and you have to understand that you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. It happens, right? So the other thing too is resale value. It's super important to understand like what your target price is so you don't overspend. Remember that we accounted for that 10% extra on the renovation budget. Well, you need to make sure that you don't go over that 10%, and you need another 10%, right? So you're going to make sure that you stay within your budget, and consider what things in the property are going to help your resale value. The biggest thing that I see people don't do on projects that really causes values to explode is landscaping. People do not spend any money on landscaping, and that's probably like my biggest pet peeve, because when a buyer pulls up to that property, they want it to look good. Like, they're going to show their friends, like, hey, we just bought this house, it's so awesome, right? And you're going to want to make sure that their friends also feel that when they see the property. So you have to think about how people will think of the property and view it, and curb appeal is huge. And it's probably the biggest mistake I see people make when they're flipping properties or renovating properties, is they don't account for a line item on landscaping. And trust me, landscaping is a lot more expensive than you think it is. It also takes a lot more time than you think it is. It's not just planting a few trees, growing some grass, and mulching. It's really just like trying to make it look good. And maybe if it's a big enough project, you would want to hire a landscape architect to do some plantings for you and design for you. So make sure you follow these steps. Super important. I hope this helps you guys with your next flip. Hit the subscribe button below. Would love to see you guys on my channel, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Take care.